Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is NetGain's Azure webinar. It's our monthly series that we've been doing. We're on our sixth topic, which is implementing a multi-layered cloud security strategy. I'm Kate Krupe. I am the Vice President for the accounting vertical for NetGain. My quick story is I worked in an accounting firm for 10 years as their Chief Information Officer. And when I left the firm, I came to the provider side, and I get now to work with some really bright people in creating products and services for the accounting firm that I wish I could have had at my disposal when I was on the other side. So it's very exciting to be working with NetGain. And one of those very smart people I was talking about is my co-presenter, Bill Sorensen. Bill, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Kate. I've been involved in the accounting industry for a long, long time. I graduated from college and became an accountant for financial services firms for a short period of time, and then moved into technology. And since then, I've been really focused on helping organizations move their environments to the cloud and really take advantage of a lot of this technology that's come along. At NetGain, I'm the Vice President of Product and Professional Services. And really today, our focus is on security in Microsoft Azure. So it's a really good, important topic. And I think we've got some key pieces to help along the way. Great to be presenting with you, Kate.
I love how you said, for NetGain, I'm the VP of product. In my other life, I'm a superhero. Thought that was coming. No. Okay.
So just a quick piece on NetGain. We were founded in 2000, based in Minnetonka, Minnesota, and really have specialized in managed cloud and IT services with a focus on Microsoft Azure. We've really become the experts in Azure in the accounting industry. We work to simplify technology, enabling organizations to really accelerate their IT transformations and increase their security and resiliency, and really continue to focus on making that end user experience better and better in technology. We serve mid-market accounting firms and really are excited to see the continued adoption of Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, that's one of the most exciting things about being here, is to be able to work in the public cloud and have all the advantages that Azure has, and to be able to bring that to all of my colleagues in the industry. So our agenda today, we're going to start by anchoring on the Microsoft well-architected framework, which we do each time to show you sort of where what we're talking about fits in. And then we're going to go through a layered security approach. We'll go through each layer in a sort of a deep dive fashion so that we can help you understand what that layer is about, what it's protecting. And then we'll end with some best practices and key takeaways. And if there's time, which in these quick soundbite type webinars, which are wonderful, there's not always a lot of time for Q&A, but if we have it, we will take questions. If not, we will take your questions offline and get back to you. All right, so this is the Microsoft well-architected framework. You need a framework really to build anything when it comes to infrastructure. And this really is a guide that gives you best practices in all the key areas of Azure infrastructure. So we are talking about security today. We have talked about cost optimization, operational excellence, performance efficiency, and reliability. And so now we're gonna do a deep dive in the security bubble. All right, so we talk about security in terms of a layered model. Layered models are really important. This is not news to many people. We talk about people, processes, and technology in almost every aspect of IT, and security is no different. So Bill is going to walk you through each of these in future slides, but I just want to make the point that there is no one solution. There's no one provider. There's no, it's not only Microsoft. It's not only your security stack. There's multiple layers that we need to build, and we have to always be thinking about the people and then the processes, because you can put all the technology you want into place. If you're not maintaining it and you don't have the processes that you need to keep things secure, it'll fall apart there. And then the technology as well. One of the things that Bill and I were reflecting on as we were preparing for this webinar is the people piece. Many people use security training software. We're not afraid to name names. Many people use KnowBe4. It's very, very popular in the industry and very popular. It's a wonderful solution for phishing and for training. And I know that there are firms who get a little tired of the training and it's sort of the same thing another day. But keeping things top of mind is really the goal. Even if you have seen some of it before, your folks have seen some of it before, that training is really key, especially when you get into busy season, because that's when we're most likely to make a mistake out of fatigue or rushing. And so having that training happening throughout the year really helps fortify the people part of the security defense.
I think, Kate, the other piece is that, the technology has really dramatically improved over the last decade. And so there's a tremendous amount of technical controls in place and defense levels. And we'll talk about a few of those in a minute. But it still is the people that's the entry point for threat actors. It's still being vigilant on the people side. And I think you'll see this training change somewhat this year as AI, and we'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation, as AI continues to grow both as a defense as well as an offense for the threat actors. So it's going to continue to be important to focus on people here.
Really good point. All right, let's take that deeper dive into the different layers.
So I'll touch on each layer here and kind of what the pieces are included in that layer. From the outside in, we look at network and perimeter security. And so that's where you'd have your typical firewalls. Today we talk about next generation firewalls, and those do a better job of identifying the details within the traffic. And then responding to that with blocks and things like that. Many people have been using remote access via VPNs and other methods. That's been in place for a long time. And then really we're seeing more and more control even inside the environment, where you break apart the network piece to continue to secure portions inside your environment. Next item, endpoint security. This has been a huge increase over the last 3 years. Historically, we talk about this as antivirus protection, and people would see tools that would look for patterns in things that were going to be installed, that type of thing. Today, here's a big piece where AI is involved, defending you and defending the endpoints, both the servers and your workstations, to really stop those attacks, to look at the behaviors of what's going on. On the application security side, we see more and more granularity in trying to control who has access to what inside applications. Very difficult in the tax and audit world, but some organizations are taking a more proactive approach there. On the data security side, you think about that more as, encryption everywhere now. And we'll touch base on that a little bit more. And then the last piece here is the governance piece. It's really policy and operations around security. What are people supposed to be doing, being very prescriptive about that. And then following that up with responses when, when the edge gets touched, and really having people be involved in that as well.
Bill, you said something earlier about the access control and I just want to comment on that. We talk about least privilege from an IT and a security and data protection standpoint. We're very familiar with it. In accounting firms, because you have so many people touch a particular engagement, whether it's it could be more than just tax or audit, but if we just stick with, a review, a comp, an actual, a whole full audit, you've got a team of people, and that team of people is going to change year to year as you're bringing in new staff members who are learning and growing. And it's one of the reasons why it's really difficult to work on least privileged access in an accounting firm. But there are ways we can address this that might not be on the client engagement side, but could add to our overall security, which is looking at your other groups that are not client service, they're not working on the client service sides, or they're not working on teamwork in the same way. So if you've got a wealth management group, if you've got a another group, a CAS group, an accounting services group that maybe has a different data set, you could start there. Or admin or marketing, back office files is another way that you could address this. So just to get people thinking that, if you've got the hard no on this because you're just thinking about tax work or audit work, maybe think a little more broadly.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kate. And really, again, the goal is to have access to all the information you need to use your job, and then not have access to anything else.
Right.
So that's the approach. We wanted to touch on what Microsoft Azure has within the environment that you can use. So they've got a big stack, and it's been built over time with a variety of acquisitions and then some maturity of some of the products. I'll go through them fairly quickly. Sentinel is their SIM, which is really their security information and event management tool. It does security orchestration, automation, and response. Those are the two acronyms. And really, it's the collector of all log information, activity of what's going on. And then they use AI in the background to look through those to try and identify when there is activity that's not normal, and then escalate those. Defender for Cloud, that's Microsoft's endpoint protection. And that's a product that's matured over time. Historically, that was something that was included in all the Windows PCs, but almost everyone would change and use somebody else's product. It's now maturing. And really in all of these, if you think about Microsoft's universe of access to activities, nefarious activities, it's really unparalleled in the world. And so they're seeing things way before other people are. So things like Defender and Defender for Cloud have improved significantly. Azure Resource Manager helps you identify resources that you're using, things that you're not. Application Insights is really a performance manager. And then Azure Monitor is your system performance. So the server performance, if you think it like that, how much CPU gets used, how much memory, those things get viewed through Azure Monitor. And then lastly, Microsoft provides an Azure Advisor really portion of the portal to try and help you look for things that could either be misconfigured or overspend. Again, and Kate, we talked a little bit briefly as well about, does a client adopt all this? Do we adopt all this? Do we do best practices, best industry solutions? You want to touch base
Yeah.
on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's so you want to we want to watch these tools mature. It's not always the best to use one suite of services. In the accounting world, we know that we have different firms have different strategies, the industry has had different strategies over time. But there are benefits to going to a full suite of services, and then there are detractors. But the detractors usually outweigh the benefits, and I'll tell you why. Because the benefits are usually always around, well, there's going to be native integration. There's going to be, this ease of work, because it's all coming from Microsoft, or it's all coming from CCH or Thomson or whatever the case might be. But that isn't always in practice. Actually, it's rarely in practice what happens, because these companies, buy other tools, rework them to fit. And that's why what you said earlier about, people would usually not use Defender, but Defender has really matured over time. They've spent some time on it, developing it, and now it's really competing in that line. So watching that is good, but always just making sure that the products you're getting are working together and doing the job they're supposed to do, and are well regarded. And there's a lot of different ways to figure out how they're, to find the best products. One is to have a really good technology partner.
That's right. And we've taken a kind of a best of breed approach with this as well. And so our solutions and our clients have a mix of different things. But again, the focus is on providing the best security possible, at a price people can afford.
Right.
Let's look at some of these layers. So if we take a peek at the network and perimeter security layer, we talked briefly about the next generation firewalls. Microsoft offers a couple other pieces here worth noting. One is the intrusion detection system capabilities. And this is really the idea that it's not just a firewall that's blocking things, but it's a solution that's looking at the activities that are going on. And in an intrusion detection system, it's looking for kind of nefarious patterns and then working to shut those down. The next one I want to touch base on is really the Azure Network Security Groups, or what we would call NSGs. Yeah. And that really lets you take any point within a client's environment or your environment and create almost a mini firewall in there that allows you to, allow this traffic, don't allow this traffic. And you'll see that set up around SQL servers, for example. You will only want the application to have access to that SQL server. The file server, other servers don't need access to that specific SQL server. So you can use an NSG to block the other activity. So, you limit the exposure then. Microsoft also offers, as part of the environment, a DDoS protection solution that happens at the edge. And so should you be part of an attack, Microsoft has the ability to see that and shut it down quickly. When we think about how this impacts you as a client or your users, your employees, there's some interesting stories that can happen around the intrusion detection systems. Kate, you want to talk about one of the ones we see periodically?
Well, yeah. So these tools are really good tools. They do a really good job, and sometimes too good of a job.
Right.
And so we do see with some of the systems that they block things that you don't mean to block, or they cause trouble. You've got an end user who's forgotten their password. They are putting the wrong password in 3, 4, 5 times and get blocked. Right now, alerts are going off, and IT is making phone calls to find out what's going on. In the past, that wasn't the case. Right, in the past, they would not get in. But now you've got people who are going to be investigating that. And so we do see that sometimes causing some problems and becoming a bit of an emergency where it didn't used to be an emergency. Luckily,
Yeah.
you know, as our training gets better and all, people tend to understand that.
Yeah, it's it all works great except during the last week of busy season.
Yeah, you don't want that at the, yes.
No.
IT will not be the hero for, you know, blocking anything during that time. All right, so let's talk a little bit about endpoint security. Now, endpoints in the Azure world, if you're using AVD, we're not just talking about your laptop, we're also talking about the endpoint that is the AVD host machine, which is sort of like a laptop, right? It's what the user's logging into and using. So we're talking about servers, we're talking about workstations or laptops, and we're talking about those host machines in a virtual environment. So MFA, right? Make sure that it's not only being used to get into the environment, but you also want to make sure that Microsoft 365 has MFA as well. That's particularly important because email is probably one of the most vulnerable places. If there is an incident and you wind up in discovery, and anybody who is sat in the seat of managing IT for an accounting firm, this has definitely happened at some point in time, and you got to go just do discovery. Well, all of your systems that are audited, that has peer review, that you have processes in place for, probably have the least risk from a data perspective. Email, that could be a disaster. People say whatever they, you know, you don't even know what's in email that can be discovered, but you're going to find out. And so having that MFA in your Microsoft environment, really important. Also, for my IT friends, making sure that those elevated privilege accounts are using MFA to get into your servers. So you want to use it inside the environment, not just to get into the environment from a best practices standpoint. Managed detection and response, we've already talked about a little bit. So that's adding that AI-based solution to help, if something gets in, be able to find it and remediate it quickly. And then, of course, on your endpoints, encryption. Really important to make sure that's encrypted. When we're talking about the physical endpoints, if someone leaves a laptop somewhere, if it's stolen, what have you, now it's really just an asset issue, and it's not a data protection issue. So making sure those are encrypted, BitLocker or whatever encryption system is yours of choice.
Kate, I have a funny story I just thought of around that. I was flying, this is probably 5 years ago, flying on a plane between Philadelphia and Minnesota, and a woman sits next to me, maybe in her late 20s, and she's got a laptop and she's extremely flustered, and and so I just ask, if there's anything I can help with, not that I could help, but and she said that she had left her laptop accidentally at security, and then had to go back and get it, and she was wondering if that's a security incident. Was that an incident? And she was an auditor actually with a big Four firm, and so we talked about it, and I asked a couple questions. I said, well, when you open the lid, are you required to put a password in right away? And she said, well, only in the beginning of the day, not the rest of the day. Oh, was the computer on? Oh, I was working on it before I went through security. And then I asked, so when you open the lid, or when they open the lid, could they see inside the computer? And she got really, really quiet. And so she was trying to figure out, is that an incident? Obviously it is. Is it a significant one or not? That's a different question. But when we look at these endpoints, it's so important to make sure, they're always locked.
I was going to say, we didn't really talk about that, but you're right. The screen lock, having the screen lock and having that at the right interval. I don't think that would have helped that lady though, because 15-minute interval is one that I'm used to as a standard. That wouldn't have helped her. By the way,
No,
you are a superhero. I knew it. I knew it on a plane helping somebody.
there you go. There you go. One other piece here is
Sorry, go ahead.
we always add whitelisting, and that's appropriate here on application security. And so that really means that only the applications on that list can run. And so should something get installed somehow, it's not on the whitelist, it's attempted to run, it would throw an error, stop it from running, and then that error would get reviewed by security. So
Right.
whitelisting is another piece that we typically use.
Whitelisting is great, and we use that all the time with our clients, and it's very popular in the industry. Really
Yeah.
limiting, the days of old where people could download any kind of application, that might have been a business application that was small and useful, or it could have been a personal application that they wanted to have on their laptops for their convenience. Those days are gone. We really limit the applications that people are putting on their laptops. So around application security, Azure does have the Azure Application Gateway that helps with the application level protection. They also have a Azure Security Center that you can use. So that is for assessment and threat detection around your applications. You also, I'm going to add, want to, for all of your SaaS applications, make sure that your providers are providing their SOC 2 reports. Those are often available publicly on their website, but if they're not, then you can inquire with your SaaS provider and get a copy of that report. And that helps you from a legal perspective when it comes to being able to protect the data that is in the hands of a provider. And then implement and automate your vulnerability management and patch management, update and patch management. So that's something that is easier and easier to do, to script these things and automate them. When you automate something, it takes a lot of risk out of it. It's being done consistently across your environment. So all of these things are really helpful. We're used to seeing process improvement automations that do the same thing, but here on the back end of automating your patches, very, very useful. You want to make sure you're always on the most up-to-date patch for your application. And I'm going to send a warning shot over the bow here for my accounting friends. I know that we don't always like to go to the latest version of an application because we like other people to work out the bugs first, and there's certainly legitimacy in that. But remember, there's security risk there too. Look at what that, if you're doing it, especially for work papers, right? If you're engagement or caseware, look and see what that update and upgrade is doing. And if there is a security component, maybe think about pushing that sooner than later. Okay.
Well, let's talk
Speaking
about
of
data
data
security.
security. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Kate, we're going to be short on time here. We've covered a few of these items on data security. One thing I'd like to have you think about is really your disaster recovery solution. Microsoft's got a phenomenal solution in Azure Site Recovery. We're a provider of that. We do a tremendously good job around delivering that capability and allowing you to test that full disaster. So that's one thing on this slide that I just want to touch base on. I think the next piece on policy and security operations is a key piece for us to move to, Kate.
True. I will say before we move on that I talk to a lot of firms, and their understanding of how the backup policies and the DR policies and technologies work together. So that's something that you want to talk to either work out with your team or talk with your providers about, but they have two specific use cases that work really well together. And now that ASR has such a affordable solution for DR, it's something you really want to investigate. And that's whether really you're in Azure or not.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it is that marriage between backups and disaster recovery.
Right. So policies and security operations, you definitely want to work on your security operations center for us, because we're a managed service provider. This is a very big deal to us, and we spend a lot of time and effort on it. But as you're layering in your security, using whatever framework you're using, whether you're using an ISO framework or an IS framework or the CIS top 20, whatever the framework you're using to address all the components of security, you want to make sure that you've got your policies and procedures wrapped around those, because the technologies themselves are not enough. You need to know how they're working, how they're being audited, how alerts are working. There's a human component of all of that. There's the Azure policy and policy enforcement compliance, which is one of the tools that you can get in Azure. And then we always recommend regular security and risk management assessments. Now, the security assessments are definitely more popular. More people do those than the risk management. The risk management is more in depth. It takes more time, but good to do those on a regular cadence and understand what your risk really is. There's a lot of providers out there who can help you with both security assessments and risk management, including NetGain.
Well, let's touch on takeaways here. Really, we want you to implement MFA everywhere, and use Azure AD as part of that. We really think that taking advantage of Azure security tools is a significant step forward. You want to monitor all those logs, and really you want to implement a solid incident response program. If you don't have one, you can contact us or your current provider. That's something that you need to have in place. And we're seeing some regulations around the IRS and other organizations that may force that compliance fairly quickly if you don't have it. We want you to implement that data protection and then think about risk management overall of your key assets. Well, I think, Kate, that wraps us up for this one.